Welcome to Gardenside Chats, where we bring together the voices of the natural landscaping movement to share the beauty and benefits of native plant gardening. Wild Ones promotes native landscapes through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. We encourage everyone to join us.
Hello, my name is Josh Nelson, and I'm the Development Director for Wild Ones. In this role, I work to secure the resources and partners that Wild Ones needs to deliver on our mission of promoting native landscapes through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. Wild Ones is a member-supported, volunteer-driven nonprofit working to connect people and native plants for a healthy planet. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with renowned author, professor, and Wild Ones Lifetime Honorary Director, Dr. Doug Tallamy. In addition, Doug is also a co-founder of Homegrown National Park, one of Wild One's newest national partners. We've asked Doug to share his thoughts on the future of the native landscaping movement, how collaboration can amplify our efforts, and his advice for those just starting their journey. Welcome, Doug.
Hi, Josh. Pleasure to be here.
So to get us started, Wild Ones members are passionate and they utilize their unique experiences to create a personal connection to inspire people to act. We encourage our members and volunteers to share their personal Wild Ones experience with others, to share how they came to be involved, and more particularly, why they became involved. To start, I want to invite you, who has inspired so many people with your work, to share your personal journey and how you came to be an advocate for native plants and natural landscaping. What was your aha moment when you realized the value of native plants to healthy ecosystems?
All right. Yeah, I was born loving nature, so there was no transition there on day one. That's what turned me out. Just being outside, being with things that moved. I have to admit, I didn't know much or care much about plants. It was all about animals, and I think that's typical for little boys. I've told this story many times, but we moved, when I was in third grade, we moved into a new development. It was called Oak Park because oaks are what they had knocked down to make the development. But our house was the first house to be built on a circle. And then they built them right to left. So the lot to the left of us was undeveloped for a full year after we moved in. And there was a little pond on that lot. And I used to go visit that every day. That was my experience with nature. And in the spring, the toads came and they sang and they mated and they laid eggs and the pollywogs developed. And this was all new to me, and it was just fascinating. And I wanted to be there the day those little baby toads hopped out onto the shore. And I was sitting right there, but that was also the day the bulldozer came and buried that whole pond. So that made an impression on me, that I could have walked over to my yard and dug another pond. I bet my parents would have helped me. Could have saved a lot of the things that were in that original pond, but it never occurred to me. So that moves beyond conservation, that moves into restoration. And of course, I think that's the future. And that, of course, is what Wild Ones is doing. Most people have to rebuild natural systems in their yards because they're already gone. And it's extremely rewarding to do that. But I grew up, went to school, discovered entomology in school, and actually was focused on behavioral ecology, why insects did what they did. And one of the things we study a lot is plant-insect interactions, how do insects interact with plants. Plants and insects together comprise most of the life on the planet in terms of species. So how they interact is really important. That led me to an understanding of host plant specialization and the fact that the insects that use our plants are the ones that have co-evolved with them. And when they don't co-evolve with them, they typically can't use the plants. Well, in the year 2000, Cindy and I moved into our new home in Oxford, Pennsylvania. It was a farm that had been farmed 300 years. It was exhausted. And the last thing they did was mow it for hay. So, and they took it out of mowing 3 years before we actually moved in. So when you mow for hay in southeast Pennsylvania, you're really mowing the rootstocks of all of the invasive plants. So it was 10 acres of autumn olive and multiflora rose and oriental bittersweet and Japanese honeysuckle and bush honeysuckle, just solid invasives. So that was my introduction to the invasive species problem. I was not surprised to see that there were no insects using those plants, or very few. But because I knew about the host plant specialization. But I figured everybody else knew this too. And the big surprise was finding out that the scientific community really hadn't been focusing on that. We weren't thinking about how replacing native plants everywhere is collapsing food webs everywhere. And that became a focus of my research. That was the year 2000. So for the last 24 years, I've been gathering the data to convince people that this is important. We got to put those native plants back. We've got to put them back everywhere. We do have parks and we do have preserves, but we're also in the sixth great extinction event the planet has ever experienced. So they're obviously not enough. And that means we've got to put them back on private property. And that's exactly what Wild Ones is doing. And it's what I want everybody to do. And that's where we are.
Well, it's as we look at these native plantings and their ability to transform spaces into focal points that connect people and address local environmental challenges while also building social bonds. It aligns with why so many people are drawn to Wild Ones, and it's about creating that community dedicated to making meaningful change. And with this growing interest in transforming residential landscapes with native plants to support biodiversity, what, from your perspective, are the most critical factors that enable communities or neighborhoods to succeed in creating this positive ecological impact? And are there any standout examples where grassroots efforts, perhaps with guidance from organizations like Wild Ones, have led to these measurable conservation benefits across an entire neighborhood or region?
I wish I had better data on the impacts of more than one house at a time doing this. Nobody's really looking at that. Nobody's measuring that in terms of ecological terms. It certainly makes sense. As you put more and more area back into productivity, you're going to attract more and more species. I mean, I can look at what's happened at our house. We took that 10 acres of invasive species, got rid of them, put in the native plants, and I'm measuring how life has returned in terms of the number of moth species now making a living at our house and the number of breeding birds that eat the caterpillars of those moths so that they can breed. And we're up to 62 species of birds that have bred on our 10 acres and 1,336 species of moths so far. But I added 87 new species of moths this year, so I'm not done. I mean, there will be more that we're recording, which shows it works. And the bigger the area, the better it's going to work. There's no doubt about it. But we look at Pam Carlson's house in Chicago, 1/10 of an acre. She's recorded 127 species of birds on that property. Margie and Dan Terpstra's 6/10 of an acre in Kirkwood, Missouri. They've recorded 154 species of birds, including 35 warbler species. There's no doubt that when you put it back together, nature is resilient. Now, we can't wait until things go extinct. They're not coming back when they're extinct. And the more people that join in, the better. So the neighborhood effect is going to be powerful, but I don't know of any studies that have looked at it at that scale. We've got 44 million acres of lawn in this country. So as people reduce that and replace it with functional plants that can't help but bring things back, from pollinators to the caterpillars that fuel that food web, and then all the things that depend on them, they're all going to come back if we do it soon enough in a big enough area. But what the intent of your question is, do we have measurements of this? No, not that I know of. If anybody does, I'd love to know what they are.
It is inspiring, though, to hear some of the figures just coming out of these small plantings and yards that, it really does make a difference what we're doing. And I think that's something a lot of our members see in their own yards. But we know that putting the plants in the ground is only half the battle, and that advocacy is a path to creating the larger systemic change. So in your view, how can people go beyond planting and really become advocates for native landscaping? What steps can they take to help shift that public perception and inspire broader support for native plants?
Yeah, what you're saying is, how do we change the culture from wanting plants just to be decorations, and in that case, you go anywhere in the world and find the prettiest plant, to plants that are going to actually run our ecosystems. I can say we're making progress. I can tell you a lot more people interested in this now than there were 10 years ago. So that's good. But how do you convince your neighbor to reduce the size of a lawn and stop spraying, for mosquitoes and everything else? It's a tough one because to just go across the street and say you're not living right and I want you to live like me, that usually doesn't work. So I promote everything we can think of. Being a good model is a really good way. So create an attractive landscape that people actually would, they admire. Hey, I'd like to do that. I get emails from people who have done this, and all the butterflies in the neighborhood are at their house, and all the kids in the neighborhood go down there and they go see the butterfly lady and everything. That's all a positive impact and helps to change attitudes. The hard pressure you have to change is a harder sell, but we do, we have elected officials, and if we make it known that these issues are important ones, and we're going to vote with that in mind, that tends to get attention from those elected officials. You have to have a lot of people saying that, but how we treat our roadsides, how we treat our public spaces, whether we do have citywide mosquito fogging. These are all issues that we can weigh in on and help change change the attitudes. Our HOAs that are dominate how we landscape. It's people that run those HOAs, and we can join them. We can educate from within. I go around giving talks. I always want to have a bring your neighbor night where you bring the neighbor who would never, ever go to a talk like this. We're fighting ignorance here. We just had an election. I don't want to bring this up, but we had an election and half the country voted for environmental collapse. Not because they want environmental collapse. It's because they don't get it. They don't understand that it's necessary, that what we do will determine how well our environment functions. So we've got to educate half the country. I mean, that's a big job, but how we do that every single possible way we can think of.
Yeah, and that's, one of the challenges is trying to change those minds. So, as an educator, you're in a unique position connecting with the next generation. So in your experience with your students, what are the biggest educational challenges or the gaps that need to be filled for people to make that connection between native plants and a healthy planet and kind of look towards the future?
Yeah, my students are not a good measure of that because they come to our department already on board. They don't have to be convinced. They don't know the specifics. And we train them to know the specifics through their own research. And many of them are going to go into academia. Many of them are going to go into conservation organizations, but they're already on board. It's what I would like access to is the 15,000 students at the University of Delaware that are not in our department, who are not there to find out about this. And that's a bigger challenge. I mean, we do get a lot of press at the university, so that helps. Like I said, I do see the needle moving. More and more people are becoming informed, and I don't know of anybody who has heard all of the logical arguments who says, no, I'm not going to do this anyway. I don't believe it. It's when all the pieces are put together for them. They may not be actively involved, but at least they're not opposed. They say, okay, I understand what you're talking about. So we just keep trying harder, keep writing the books, keep giving talks. We got to make documentaries. People don't read, they watch. That will help. Everybody in Wild Ones is going to be a good model. That helps. Your organization is getting bigger. All these organizations are growing. So it is working. We might have to work a little bit harder or a little faster, but it is working, I think.
And yeah, as we talk about growth, it is inspiring to see how many people are joining the movements, really starting to see the value of native plants and natural landscapes. And I think we're starting to, reach some of those non-traditional audiences that haven't always been supporters of environmental causes, and realizing that there's benefits to all different types of people and, no matter your background with this. So as we kind of look towards the future, what is your vision for the natural landscape movement as we continue to grow? And, if more communities embrace native landscaping, how would you imagine our ecosystems, wildlife, and, our daily lives might look 50 or even 100 years from now? And what kind of legacy can we leave for the future generations if we start today?
Well, we absolutely have to reach a sustainable relationship with the ecosystems that support us. An unsustainable relationship is unsustainable. It will not work long in the future. So, we use that word sustainable a lot, but really there's no other alternative. So 100 years from now, if we haven't mastered this, we're not going to be here. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but there are now more people on the planet than it can support with its current level of resources. So we have to slow down growth, and we have to increase the level of resources instead of continually decreasing them. And that means putting nature back. Those resources come from nature. So as I said, we're moving in the right direction. A lot of people they don't want to stick out in their neighborhood. Peer pressure is the most important thing. So they're going to do what their peers do. And as more and more people actually change their landscapes, it will become the more common approach. So you won't have to stick out in order to join in. It's not that they're opposed. They don't want to be a rebel. They don't want to be fined by their HOA or their township. So those types of constraints are going to disappear in the coming years. They're already starting to disappear. So I see it accelerating. It's accelerating now, but I see it accelerating a whole lot more in the future, where it becomes the commonplace approach to living on Earth. We're going to live with nature instead of separate from it. E.O. Wilson says we got to save half the Earth to have life on Earth at all. We got to save nature in half of the planet. And we've already got agriculture in half of terrestrial Earth, which means there's not a third half to put nature in. So humans and nature are going to have to coexist. That means where we live, where we work, where we play, even where we farm. We've got to do a much better job at that. And we can. We know how to do this. We know about the power of prairie strips. We know about what's going to happen if we put the native plants back on the roadsides of agriculture without reducing yield at all. We can bring the monarch back. We can bring the native bees back. They were here in 1976 when we had the largest monarch population on record, and agriculture was here too. So we just have to get a little bit smarter about how we do it. So from that perspective, I'm upbeat. I think it is going to happen. 100 years from now, it will have to have happened, or we will be in trouble. So.
Well, it's always nice to have that kind of positive outlook on things. And, you've shared so much valuable insight today about the ecological role of native plants and just the collective power of community action. As the natural landscape movement gains momentum, what advice would you give to individuals and communities who are just beginning their journey with native plants? What small, impactful steps can each of us take to ensure that this movement really endures and continues to transform our landscapes for generations to come?
I'm a proponent of starting slowly and seeing the benefits. If I said, okay, I want you to reduce the area of lawn in half, and I want you to do it tomorrow, I don't know how much lawn you have, but even if it's a small patch, that's a big job. So I could say, I want you to plant a tree, and I want you to do that tomorrow, and make it a small tree. You can do that. You can do that and put a bed under that tree. You can picket that. You can put in some a ground cover. That has reduced the area of lawn. It's put a valuable plant into your yard. Now this is ecosystem specific. I don't want you to plant a tree in the High Plains desert, but for most of us, particularly Wild Ones members, we have taken away the trees as you move, and the upper Midwest, moving farther and farther west, was more savanna than forest. But do we have that savanna landscape back? In a lot of places, no. Or in a lot of places, we've let it become overrun because we've removed what kept it a savanna, and that was fire and grazing. So we have to manage those places. A lot of people, 82% of us live in cities, and we don't have big landscapes to manipulate. So this is where the volunteerism comes in. We've got land trusts all over the country who specialize in buying and preserving land. They do not specialize in managing that land. They typically don't have the budget or the people to do it. So this is where the volunteers come in, because all of those places need to be managed. The invasive species problem is huge. We created it ourselves. So, okay, it's a headache, but we have to manage them. We also have to manage our overabundance of deer, because they're not allowing the native plants to come back. They eat the natives, don't eat the non-natives, and that's what creates the invasive problem. So this requires management. It requires cooperation from everybody, but a lot of hands-on work too.
Well, I really appreciate that perspective of, there's what you can do in your own backyard, but then there's this greater system. And if we all kind of pitch in together and work on that, we can really make this big difference.
Absolutely.
Well, as always, Doug, your wisdom and passion's inspiring, and I want to thank you for taking time to talk with us today.
Wonderful to have the opportunity. Thanks so much.
At Wild Ones, we believe that each of us has the power to make a positive impact, not only by planting native species, but inspiring others to do the same and advocating for sustainable landscapes in our neighborhoods. As we move forward, let's remember that even small actions can lead to profound change. By working together as individuals, communities, and partners, we can ensure that native landscapes thrive across every corner of our nation, creating a healthier planet for generations to come. We invite everyone to join us on this journey, to learn, to advocate, and to grow with Wild Ones. Thank you again, Doug, for sharing your insights and experiences with us today, and thank you for your ongoing support of Wild Ones. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope we'll have the opportunity to continue this conversation.
I'm sure we will. Thank you.
Thanks for joining this Wild Ones Gardenside Chat. Be sure to like, subscribe, and stay connected for more native plant inspiration.